Hello there, I've picked myself up a Videopac games console. So if you're not familiar with these, they're a second generation games console that would have competed with the likes of the Atari 2600 and Intellivision back in the day. So here in Europe they were known as the Philips Videopac. Over in America, the Magnavox Odyssey 2. And over here in Europe they were released in December 1978. Discontinued 1984, so not a bad run I suppose. And I think in that time they sold about 2 million units, which, yeah. Inside it's got an Intel 8048 CPU, which is clocked at 1.79 megahertz. It's got, wait for this, 64 bytes of RAM, 128 bytes of audio-visual RAM. The ROM is a little bit more respectable. It's got 1024 bytes for the ROM. Early versions came with detachable gamepads. So these big chunky affairs here, with an awful lot of travel in them. And what looks like, well, it is a DB9 port I suppose, but it's not to the Atari standard, it's its own wire. So if you've got an Atari gamepad, it's not going to work with this. Later models, they had the controllers hardwired into the console. They were a black colour. I've got one of those as well. I'll explain why in a bit. My console is in, how would you describe it? It's been loved, I think. It's been used. So it's got a few scrapes and scratches. It's incredibly dirty. It's actually a black plastic that's been painted with silver paint. So this isn't the base plastic, this is actually a silver paint on it. So I could, in theory, refinish this and make it look a lot better. Whether or not it's worth it, I don't know. What really attracted me to it was this membrane keyboard that it comes with, and that is used for certain games and educational software, but I'll run into that a bit later. It does work. It was sold to me as not working, but all that was a bit of an iffy connection on the video modulator in the back. I've cleaned that up and it seems fine ever since. I want to dig into this just to sort out one of the control pads, which is giving me grief. I want to give it a good clean. I want to change the capacitors because they could be up to 40 years old, depending on when this was actually made. And I'm going to attempt a composite video mod for it as well. So hopefully that'll give me a bit of a better picture on a modern TV. So I'm going to start digging into this now. And we're in. That's just the connector for the modulator. That big bugger's the modulator. This is incredibly dirty. Awful lot of RF shielding, which I think we'll just remove. Yeah, there's just some little twisty tabs, so if I straighten those up, this should lift off. He says, with confidence. And we're in. Okay, so now that the board's out, let's have a bit of a closer look. There's no solder mask whatsoever on this board, so cheaply made. that is the slots for the keyboard membrane. So I have to be very, very careful with that membrane because I think my chances of getting replacements are 0. Early model signified by the 2 joystick ports. The power cable has been soldered directly onto the back of the power socket. So I think what's happened is this has had a replacement cable at some point. So the original must have been damaged, and at some point somebody's thought, yes, this is worth repairing. It's a big cap. Socket. And some of the chips. And there's an awful lot of logic in this. And I've looked at the date codes on the chips, and the latest one I can find is for the 40th week of 1980, so that helps to date it a little bit. And yeah, we've got more shielding as well. So there's shielding inside shielding on this thing, so I'll have to remove that and see what's underneath. Doesn't seem to be too many electrolytic caps in there. So what I'll do, I'm going to remove the extra shielding, give this whole thing a bit of a wash with IPA, change the caps out, and then we can start looking at other things. So all the shielding's held in with solder, so I'm going to try and remove that with a bit of wick. See how that goes. That's a big ground plane I'm trying to solder though. Right, well that was an ordeal. Right, I'll get to swapping out some caps. Okay, so it's been a couple of days now since I stripped this down and did anything with it. And I'm going to start resuming work on it now, mainly because some of the parts I've ordered, not everything, but some of the parts I've ordered have now turned up, mainly my capacitors. So I'm going to go and swap those out. Now, I've had a look at this under some magnification, and at least a couple of these capacitors have leaked. So I'm going to take my time with this and make sure I get that all cleaned up properly so that there's no lasting damage to the board. Hopefully it's not done too much damage as it is. I mean, the thing was working, so we'll see. So I'll power up my desoldering station and I'll get to this. Right, so here's the thing. This capacitor here, this big bugger, must be a filter cap. You look underneath, we've actually got 3 terminals. Now, only 2 of them are used. The third one I think is for stability, but the positive and negative aren't brilliantly marked on this. So I've just been poking around with a multimeter and I've figured it out. Right, so on my board, looking at it this orientation with the control ports at the top, this connection here, no connection. It's purely there for stability, it doesn't connect to anything. This one at the bottom, that goes directly to ground. And that's your positive here. So if you are going to recap one of these and you're not sure about the 3 prongs, there you go. That's how mine's wired anyway. all the caps have been changed. Now I think I'm just going to get rid of some of the crud on it because the thing's absolutely filthy, so I'll give it all a little bit of an IPA bath. That'll do. Okay, so recapping completed. That's that awkward one I talked about before. It's basically just a smoothing cap and it goes directly across the power rail. So if you're unsure of the polarity of this, a multimeter will be your friend. That was a radial, which should have been an axial, so I've just bent the legs and added some insulation underneath. Now, some of these capacitors had a little bit of tape underneath them just to insulate them from the board, and some of them didn't, so it's a little bit inconsistent. So where it didn't, I've just stood the capacitor off the board slightly. So, I mean, they are insulated anyway, but should that insulation break down on the case, I don't want it shorting out anything. So yeah, we're done. I'm just going to go remove these socketed chips, clean them up with a bit of contact cleaner, do the same for the ports, just so they don't give any trouble in the future, and then I'll power it up and test it. Okay, power it up and see what it does. That, believe it or not, is correct operation when there's no cartridge installed. So, yeah, we still work. That's absolutely fine. I can put my RF shields back on now with confidence. Another day and another parts delivery. Right, so I've got to try and get all of this mess soldered onto here in the right order, and if I do it properly, I should have a composite out board to go with the Videopac. So yeah, I might do this off camera, I'm not sure, but because I think this is going to take me a while. I'm actually following somebody else's design, so this isn't my own design. Probably safer that way, actually. So yeah, I'm going to get cracking on that. So not my neatest work, but I have built my video composite circuit and it does seem to work. So I got there in the end. I'm fairly happy with the picture quality as well. I've got it sort of jerry-rigged at the moment just for testing, and hopefully the picture quality will improve even further once I start soldering wires in properly. I didn't go into how to build this because it's not actually my design. It's a design I found online, and I don't want to be disrespectful to the person who did design it by sharing their design across on another channel. But if you are curious about the way this goes together, please do by all means give me a shout, and I'll point you in the right direction, and I can link you to the designer's webpage directly. Right, I'll show you it in operation. Yeah, what's the term? Jerry-rigged. Right. I'm literally just going to hold wires onto the end of this, and hopefully we'll get a picture. So, bear with me. That's to there and that's the ground. Yep. Don't worry about that little bit of waving that you can see every now and then. That's because I'm holding a bare wire onto the end of a connector. But yeah, it seems to be a nice stable picture. So I'm happy that works. I can get that installed. Really not too happy about the way this power connector's been bypassed at the back. So the cable has been fed through the case and soldered directly to the terminals. I don't like that at all. I mean, the previous owner seems to have made a fairly solid job of it. I just don't like things like that. If they get tripped over, you can do damage to the board rather than just pull a plug out. So I think I'm going to fit a barrel jack and barrel socket to it. I tried to get the same type of connector that matches the socket, but I just can't find one, so I'll give that up as a lost cause. Yeah, that took some bending, crimping and swearing, but I've managed to fit the barrel jack into the original retainer. So hopefully that will line up with the case okay as well. Right, so I'll solder the contact on. I think I'm going to set it to centre pin negative, simply because I have a lot of Spectrum power supplies lying around, and if I inadvertently plug the wrong thing in, there's less chance of me damaging something if it's the correct polarity. So that's the only reason, that's why I'm going to wire it this way. So at this point I can start putting things back in the case, but I just want to give the case a little bit of a clean up, certainly on the inside, before I put the board back in. Now what you can do is you can remove all of these clips. The case will then separate. This top painted part could be removed and repainted and refinished, look really nice. Personally, I don't tend to worry too much if things have got the odd scrape on them. It just shows that they've had a bit of a life, and to me it's part of the character of the unit, so I don't tend to paint these up and make them look brand new. If you do, good for you, you've got a lot more patience than me, and if it's your system, you do what you want. This is me. Because I'm not removing this membrane, and it seems to have actually been stuck in, rather than put anything on here that's going to damage any sort of glue, I'm literally going to use baby wipes to clean this up. Something fairly inoffensive like that. Just to get the dirt off. Okay, I'm going to make a start on wiring this in, but I thought I'd just run through the colour coding first. And this is how mine is. I can't guarantee this is how they all are. But your brown wire, that's positive 5 volts. Orange is ground. Red is your video signal. Black is the audio signal. If you're going to do this yourself, please do just double check that. I can't guarantee that yours will be the same as mine, but if it helps, that's how mine is, so you never know. It'll give you somewhere to start anyway. I need to cut some holes in the back of the bottom panel just for these little RCA plugs that I've bought. It's on the back, so I'm not going to worry too much about it, but I am going to take some measurements because I would like them to at least be in line with each other so it doesn't look terrible. Even though it's on the back, I'll know it's there, so let's try and get this as good as possible. So I'm going to do some measuring, drill a couple of holes and get these jacks mounted. Right, I'm itching to test it all out now and make sure it works, but I think before I do, I better have a look at this power supply. So straight away we're missing a screw, which means somebody's been tampering, and there's no strain relief on this cord, so I don't think that's the original cord, especially when you consider the fact that it was soldered onto the board at the other end as well. So for safety's sake, let's have a look inside this. Probably something I should have done first, but never mind. Oh. Yeah. So that right there, you can see that's a lot of exposed wire in a power supply for me. So diode pack, fuse. The main side looks okay. If there's anything to worry about there, it looks pretty untouched and the strain relief's still in, but this, I need to tidy that up. I can't leave that. So how does this come out? Very simply like that. That'll do. And what are we looking at? Let's take you out. Oh yeah, that's a dodgy bit of soldering. I'll have to tidy that up. Right, I'll get my desolder gun set up. So for the strain relief, I'm just going to try and thicken out the wire with some heat shrink tubing and see if that will hold it in place. Yeah, I wouldn't exactly call it pretty, but it is solid. Ugh, dirt on my fingers. Yeah, it should be safe. That cord isn't going to pull out anyway without some significant force being put on it. And that was the goal, so yeah, I'm happy with that. Okay, let's talk about the controllers. So as I mentioned earlier, the early models, they had the detachable joysticks in the silver colour, and the later models, they were black and they were hardwired into the system. Me being me and not researching what I was buying, I didn't realise that at the time, so I bought what I thought was an early joystick because it does have the 9-pin connector on it. And when I tried to use it, it didn't work properly. So I tested the pin out, and this is actually wired to the Atari standard. So either Philips did bring out a version of this joystick for use with other machines, which I don't think they did, or this is originally a hardwired joystick that somebody's converted for use with a different machine, which is more likely. So I bought, it was a new DB9 connector, but the only ones I can find are the wider ones that have the, you know, the 2 screws at the side for holding them in. They just won't physically fit. I mean, the actual port is the same, but they won't physically fit in the back of the machine because the backing plastic gets in the way. So until I can find a replacement plug for this, or if somebody's got one of these and they want to sell me it, please let me know. Until I can do that, I'm stuck with one joystick at the moment, which is a little bit limiting, because from what I can tell from this system is it's geared up very much for 2-player games. That seems to be what this system's all about. So I'll crack this one open anyway, because I want to have a look inside. And I've not actually looked inside this before, so... Right. Yeah, I mean, if we look at it there, we can see the original strain relief from whatever this cable was removed from. It's been rewired. Yeah, it's quite an interesting design, actually. It uses a membrane, so similar to a Sinclair or Amstrad computer keyboard. So I want to be very delicate with this when I do eventually rewire it, because I think the chances of getting a replacement one of these are 0. So yeah, that's on one side. The joysticks themselves, they've got quite a powerful spring in them, and they do sort of... You've got to push them quite far to get them to actually function. All I can describe it as is like driving a really old car with a really loose gearbox. But it's actually really satisfying to use. I quite like it. So anyway, yeah, that's the joysticks. That's what you can expect. Silver for the early models, black hardwired for the later ones. You know, I'm fairly pleased with the way this all turned out. It's cleaner, it's been electrically restored. It still looks as battered as it ever did, but until I've decided whether I'm going to go to the trouble of painting it or not, that's how it's going to look. And to be honest, I don't think I'm going to bother. I don't mind old things looking old, as long as they don't look terrible. The connectors on the back, they look quite neat. And the only other connectors we've got are the 2 joystick ports, and you can see there the trouble I would have putting a wider connector into that joystick port. And the replacement power socket. So let's get it hooked up and I'll run you through some software. So the software comes in these big plastic boxes. I think the very, very early releases actually came in cardboard boxes from about 1980 onwards. I think they were all in these plastic cases. And I love these cartridges. I just love the size of them. So on startup, every single cartridge will give you this select game, and the instruction manual that comes with the game will tell you what number does what within the game. Usually it's just a difficulty setting, so you'd pick 0 to 3 or 4 or whatever it is. Just pick one. Oh, the reset as well. Yeah, apparently you can unplug and plug these in and just reset without turning the power off to the system. Personally, I don't do that just because it's old tech and I don't want to push my luck with it. I like to power it off before I start pulling cartridges out, but apparently you can do that. So let's just give it a bit more volume. And yeah, there we go. This is a 2-player game, and obviously I've only got the 1 joystick, but just a very simple catapult game. The longer you hold the joystick, the further you go. I can never hit anything with it. It takes practice. Hey, there we go. Okay. This is another 2-player game. You just catching that ball, and when I miss it will switch to player 2. And of course I can't move now because I don't have the other joystick installed, but Yeah, that's that one. Oh, it's a very 70s sounding thing. Right, this is the only cartridge I've got that makes use of the keyboard. And it's a simple mathematical program. So presumably there was an educational angle to this as well. So let me just zoom out slightly. Yeah, okay. So choose our operator, what we want to be tested on. 1, skill, 1, it really, so. And then it's just going to give us mathematical puzzles, and we'd use the keyboard to input the answer. That'll tell us if we got it right or wrong. And you can do division and multiplication, you can up the skill level as well, so. Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing I've known that, well, it's the only thing I own that uses the keyboard. I do believe you could get a basic ROM for this as well, and it would have a feature for plugging into a cassette deck and saving programs as well. So in that respect, maybe you could call it a computer, but it isn't really. And to be honest, for what it is, oh yes, it's a membrane keyboard, but it works absolutely fine for this because it's not a computer, it is a console, and you're not on it and typing all the time, so it's absolutely fine. I mean, that's a computer with a keyboard with a membrane, and that's an absolute nightmare to program. For this, really doesn't matter so much. So there you go. That is the Philips Videopac. That is mine. The only thing I want to do further with it is try and track down a new joystick. But apart from that, I think I'm going to call this done. So I hope that was of some interest to somebody. If you're not familiar with the system, maybe it's given you a little bit of a taste of what it's about. And the best thing about these is they're cheap. I mean, I paid £15 for this in a non-working condition. Tested working ones I've seen going, they're only about £30. If you want something in the box, yeah, you're going to pay more for it, but it depends how bothered you are about something like that. And they're not rubbish. I mean, they're okay. They're perfectly entertaining. I enjoy this. In fact, I've ordered a load more games which are on the way. Yeah, they're perfectly playable, I think. If you're into your retro gaming, you'd get a lot out of this. So I would say, if you're looking for something retro and cheap, consider one of these and play it with a friend. That seems to be what these are geared for. So yeah, enjoy. Anyway, I'll sign off. Thank you very, very much for watching. It is very much appreciated. Have a nice day, evening, whatever it is you're up to.